Every time I watched the movie Home Alone as a kid, I felt envious of Kevin McAllister and how he had such a gala time living alone. There were no restrictions and he had all the freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. That, of course, was a movie, and he was a kid, and he probably couldn't have lived alone in real life, legally speaking, but he just happened to for a few days. There are a lot of people in this world who are increasingly making the conscious choice to live alone, and it just so turns out that the number of people living alone in Europe has doubled since the 1980s. So, with the support of the Graham Foundation for Advanced Studies in the Fine Arts, we speak to architects Maria Vittoria Tesei and Flavio Martella about the social, economic, and architectural implications of living alone. I am Vaissnavi Shukla, and this is Architecture Off Center, podcast where we highlight contemporary discourses that shape the built environment but do not occupy the center stage in our daily lives. We speak to radical designers, thinkers, and changemakers who are deeply engaged in redefining the way we live and interact with the world around us. We are here today to talk about your work, specifically an article that you guys wrote on future architecture called Living Alone. And so before we get into the details of what living alone means, I want us to set the ground a little bit in terms of what or how we can differentiate living alone versus loneliness. We spoke about it the first time we talked, and I think early on we should make that distinction about how maybe living alone is a choice, whereas loneliness perhaps is a slightly more different condition. So let's get started.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. And you start strong with the biggest question, probably. Well, you say living alone is a choice, especially right now that we have more choices, more lifestyles that can accommodate our uses and, I don't know, the daily lives. Living alone is one of them, is a choice, and we can or we cannot make it. Loneliness instead is something that we can feel even if we are surrounded by people. I mean, I can feel lonely if I am in a family. I can feel depressed if I am in a context full of friends, or alone in a context full of friends. So it's not something that is just a choice. It's probably a consequence of your background, of your context, of many factors, probably. So they are not, of course, they are intertwined, they are connected, living alone and loneliness, because if you are living alone, you can feel lonely, but probably you are chasing the loneliness, or you want to be alone in some parts of your daily routines. You need your break, for example, in the evening after work. You need your space to just stay alone, to recover from the chaos of the daily life of work or study or whatever. Instead, loneliness, it's something that can happen in every circumstance, basically. I don't know. I well, if I continue, probably I will start to talk about living alone, but not just the question itself. But probably you can agree also, no, in what is loneliness and living alone, no, Maria Vittoria?
Yeah, more than loneliness and living alone, I was rereading again the book where you wrote your contribution 1 year ago, which is called Loneliness and the Built Environment. And there is this article wrote by Pallasma, who argues that solitude is different than loneliness. And he says that solitude is a positive way of being alone, while loneliness is kind of a negative condition. So that's maybe what you were saying, and it's like they are two different ways of of being alone. And the main difference is between them is that solitude, it's like a voluntary condition, while loneliness, it's not.
Yeah, living
I don't
alone
know
is
if you agree.
just the architectural expression of solitude,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. So maybe, yeah, living alone, it's a condition that comes later.
But
And
we can also say that living alone and solitude are also a little bit different, because I can live alone, but I'm also connected through the digital devices or personal devices. I'm also hyper-connected or hyper-connected with a lot of people, a lot of friends, families, parents, also children, if you have it, through your devices. So I'm physically alone, but not totally alone.
Okay, let us
we're
unpack that,
never.
because there's some deep, deep stuff Flavio just said. Okay, so first, solitude, I never thought about it that way. That solitude has a slightly more optimistic connotation, and loneliness doesn't necessarily. However, you could be living alone and you could be living in solitude, or you could be lonely. So that's about the mental state of mind, and living alone is a physical condition. But I think, Flavio, what you just touched upon, I think it's very important to unpack that, because in today's day and age, with social media and with hyper connectivity about almost everything in your life, even if you look at the way data is used, you could be living alone in a house where your data is not privy to just you, but your data is actually going in the hands of people you probably don't want it to.
Yeah.
In that
It's very
sense,
true.
so it's kind of like it's a paradoxical question. Are you actually living alone? If you are connected with other people, does it really, like, can we establish that living alone is boiling down to the physical condition and not really a social condition? Because I was going to lead this into like historical origins of living alone, and how that probably back in the day would have meant being socially exiled in some way or socially isolated. But in today's day and age, then it just probably comes down to choice or circumstances. But you cannot necessarily be alone if you're constantly on your phone, if you're sharing life updates, if you're showing everyone what you're eating, how you're living, what movie you're watching. What do you think living alone then means in today's day and age?
Yeah,
Well,
probably.
means physically living alone, but we are never actually alone. We will never be.
No, I mean, it's like that. We probably, especially, well, I think in developed country, we are never alone. Basically, we are always in some way connected to something or to someone, through a network of care, or just simply social network, or a network of some kind. But probably a lot of more people right now are searching, or trying to live alone, or requesting to live alone, just to take out some noise from their crowded lives. I don't know. This is just my speculation, our speculation, that we advanced also in a paper. It's not proven, I mean, but it's something that I believe could be true, that we are so overcrowded, we are so overwhelmed about all those noises that we receive, all those inputs that we receive throughout the day, by social media, by television, by radio, by podcast, by Spotify songs, or simply work, meeting, chats, or whatever, that we need to take out something. And probably this something is the human contact after those situations. So could be a possibility that we need a moment just to have more space for ourselves. And a lot of people actually, I mean, this is probably one of the most provocative explanation of why most people want to live alone right now in Europe and in Western countries. Because I don't know, otherwise it would be inexplicable. because also living alone is the most expensive living that we have right now. So it's something that it goes against our income, our lifestyle, our works, our jobs, our cities, also because it's way more expensive for the city.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to get into. So I thought we could probably look at the phenomenon of living alone through maybe like three lenses. So one of them, of course, is the economical lens, right? Both from the person's expenditure point of view, but then also maybe we could talk about the real estate point of view. Second thing I wanted to talk about after this was the social implications and how the trend in an increasing number of people living alone probably reflects a change in society, in family structures. And then in the end, I also want to touch upon the public culture or the public portrayal of living alone. And you've made a lovely film on, with vignettes of how that's portrayed in advertising and popular culture and film media. So let's start with the first one. Let's talk about, you mentioned it's expensive to live alone. And as students, of course, whenever, we go to grad school or we've just started working, you want to share bills, even though you may not necessarily like your roommates at all time. But economically, it's a decision that one makes that, you really want to split the bills. It's easier on the pocket. You got to save a little more. But the two charts that you shared earlier, and maybe I'll put it up somewhere, is that an increasing number of people who've chosen to live alone are actually concentrated in like the Nordic parts of Europe. So you have a lot of people from Norway, Finland, Germany, Denmark who or most, like it percentage wise, most percentage of the population that lives alone is in these countries. Can you give a little bit of an insight into how that's happening, what's that happening, and how economically does one read into that?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think we have to say that a lot of people right now, starting from the 80s, living alone is something that is always more popular. It has gone through a very huge boom during those 40, 50 years. Yeah. And it's something that is happening basically everywhere. But as you say, in the Nordic country of Europe, especially, it's more frequent. I mean, we studied a little bit more Latin countries such as Italy, Spain, or France, but we can easily say that in the Nordic country, the culture is so different. For example, they leave home at 18 to study abroad or just to study in another city, in another university. So for their like culture, it's more common to just simply get out of the house. That in Latin countries such as Spain or Italy is not so common. I mean, if we can stay with a family to afford a little bit of expenses or to avoid just living in a smaller apartment in a very big city, is something that we can actually do that in Italy or in Spain. So they have this different culture, and then they have bigger incomes and they have a lot of financial helps by the state or the municipalities. So in a way, they are helped and they are pushed also to live alone, to start an independent way of life. It's something that we are, well, in a different culture, so we perceive that living alone is something that we can experience, but a little bit in advanced age. So basically, that's why Nordic country, they have this huge boom that right now I believe that it's that it's above 60% of the population that lives alone in those countries. So it's something that is
40%.
What?
Yeah, more than 40% of the people
40, sorry.
in northern countries like Germany, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Japan also, because I mean, I'm here with a graph, a chart that shows the share of the one person household in these countries. And yeah, of course, the richest countries have more people who lives alone. It goes together with the incomes, with the wealthiness of the countries. It's like it's the same, it's the same thing. So
Yeah, but for
yeah.
example, we live in, well, we are Italian. We were born in Rome, but we live in Madrid, and we have a lot of examples of friends that actually or lives alone or wants to live alone in a city like Madrid, that it's a very lively city or with a lot of activities, and it's more or less a 15-minute city because around your place you have at 15 minutes walk or biking, you have everything basically. So in a context like that, people doesn't see a problem to live alone. Instead, they feel that they can live better in the city. So it's something that is in those countries or in those cities such as Madrid is basically only related to income, to an economical issue, because Madrid is also a Latin city or a Southern Europe city, and the income is not so high, it's not so like powerful, I mean, to rent or buy a small house to live just by yourself. So a lot of people want to live alone, but they cannot. Also because the state or the municipality doesn't help to live alone, because it's just not profitable so much. I mean, it can be so profitable, but not so many people actually have money to live alone.
So since you're both practicing architects, and I know the nature of commission in a lot of European countries is through competition, and all the path-breaking revolutionary housing projects have traditionally come out from European countries. Now, as practicing architects, when you look at the kind of competitions that are floated for new housing, do you think this pattern of one-person households reflects in the kind of competitions that are being floated for housing? What I'm trying to get at is, do you think the housing typology has evolved over time to accommodate all these people who want to live alone? Or do you think it's a phenomenon that is happening nonetheless, but it's not top-down being recognized by city governments or municipalities or even real estate developers?
Well,
no. Yeah, most competitions are for family units housing. Even if they are social housing, rarely there are one unit for one pupil, for one person housing. So yeah, that's the problem. I mean, the most of the times one unit people housing are like modified later. It's like you have big houses and then you have to divide them to rent. So
yeah, I
unlike
mean,
the
it's difficult.
West, where you already
construction.
see like studio apartments, as part of like same apartment complex, you would have 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and then you would have studios, which by default assumes that it's going to be one person. So just wondering if that's something that comes down as a brief, or is it then, as you said, modified later on?
Well, it depends. I mean, this is a very difficult matter because it's something that is not so regulated right now. It depends on the country, basically. Because, for example, in Denmark, they do have a normative, a legislation that actually speaks to people living alone. It actually authorizes you to design something that starts with a studio apartment, a very small, like capsule, or well, capsule is too much, but I mean a very small apartment. For example, the latest example is a big tower, Bjarke Ingels Tower in Copenhagen. That is kind of brand new, and it's a studio apartment tower. But for example, in Madrid or even, yeah, it's luxurious.
Of course, luxury apartments.
Yeah, it's small studio apartments, but for rich people because it's very, very expensive. But well, apart from that, it's always returning to the economical issue of living alone. In the other countries or southern European countries, living alone by law it's very uncommon because it costs more square meter. I mean, if you live alone by law, for example, by Italian law, you need 45 square meter. To live in two, yeah, we are kind of posh.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, but the Italian law actually it's very good for living or for residential units. It's very comfortable. I mean, we must have huge bedrooms, huge kitchens, and huge spaces, huge living areas. It's very different, for example, from the Spanish law. But returning to the Italian one, to live alone, we need 45 square meters right now, or more or less. I mean, and to live in two, 72, I believe. So to design a house for two people, it costs less square meter than design a house for one people. So basically, you need, talking about real estate management, you need to sell the single apartment, the house for a single people, to a cost per square meter higher than an house for two, and way higher than an house for three, and way higher than an house for four. So that's the bigger problem. So as Maria Vittoria was saying, a lot of studio apartments in Madrid and in Rome came from remodeling or reinventing bigger apartments. I mean, I buy a big apartment for four, and then I hire an architect to divide the apartments in three lesser apartments or four lesser apartments, just to rent more apartments and then more money. Basically, this is the issue behind it. Yeah, this is the trend right now. That's the point. But actually, they are in some way they are reading very well the situation, because a lot of people wants to live alone, wants to have the possibility to live alone in a big city, because living alone is a trend that is happening especially in bigger cities than in the countryside. I mean, the countryside, basically no one lives alone because they have bigger houses in a different context. But in the city, it's happening, and it's so frequent to want the will to live alone, that they are basically reading very well the situation, such as also the products, the products and the market, the global market, that is like pushing a lot of products for people that doesn't want to cook, that doesn't want to spend time like the normal traditional housing time, like cook, clean, or taking care of something. I mean, they just sell services and products to doesn't cook, to have a single meal prepared, to have like caring services, to take care of your pets, your kids, or what you have, and also cleaning the house. You don't have to clean the house, because if you don't have a family or whatever, why you need an house clean every day? I mean, you can hire someone once a week and that's it. So
yeah, it's like in the last 20 years, while we were doing the video for the Living Alone in Future Architecture platform, we like realized that the living alone lifestyle was kind of romanticized, maybe from by TV series, by movies, by advertisements, but then we actually keep on living in older spaces. It's like as Achuaman was saying in her book about the woman and the house, we live in spaces of yesterday in a science fiction world. It's like it's a paradox, because we keep on living in the houses of like 60 years ago, but everything is moving on. Technology is moving on very fast, but our spaces, they are quite the same.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If you think about, for example, the kitchen, I mean, the kitchen is something that is kind of controversial right now because you need a kitchen. That's the law. I mean, I have to design a house with a kitchen, and the kitchen is fine. But for example, Anna Pujaner, a very excellent researcher and professor and architect, she researched very well. She did a very meaningful research about a possibility of a kitchenless city. That's because basically you have a lot of situations where you can find a kitchen. You can find, for example, in a city like Madrid, you can find a lot of restaurants that offers you a complete meal. I mean, first dish, second dish, a dessert, and like a water, a drink, with 10 or 11 euros. So it's very cheap. I mean, like McDonald's cheap. It's very, very cheap. So you can find every kind of situation. Dark kitchens or prepared meal, as I say before, they are very, very cheap. I mean, not so tasteful probably, but they are improving also. So do you really need the traditional big kitchen with 4 fires, an oven, the dishwasher? I mean,
In Italy, yes, we need it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we did an exposition in 2018, I believe it was, in Italy. We started in Italy, and then we brought the exhibition in Spain. And I made this study about how much time do you spend actually doing housework, and how much time you can save by buying products, just to show that right now the market, the global market, is improving or is pushing this lifestyle. That's, I don't know if it's something that is good or wrong, but it's something that is happening. And a lot of housewives, like 50 or 60-year-olds housewives, they say, yeah, but you cannot live in a house without a kitchen. I mean, yeah, you cannot live in a house without a kitchen. I understand this, but probably I can. I mean, no, I cannot. But some others.
Yeah.
Again, we can't because we're Italian.
Yeah, a lot of people that we know, and probably also you know, or probably you are one of them, you probably don't need a kitchen daily. You need some part of the kitchen, that's for sure, but you don't need probably, or you, or your friends or our friends, a very huge and fully applied kitchen. So it's something that is controversial. You can save a lot of space. You can also try to understand how people is actually living today, how also people that lives alone lives today. There is something that is different, because living alone is not living in a family. I mean, I understand why in a family of 4, for example, or 5, is cheaper and more convenient to prepare meals at home, because it's something that, well, I have to make it for 1, I will make it for 5. It's the same time, but I will save a lot of money in that way. But to live alone, I have to buy everything by 1, and it will cost me a lot of money, a lot of time. Instead, I can just go down to the bar, to the restaurant, and eat something, or buy something that is cheaper, that is already made, or it's full of services like dark kitchens, or also in Spain, those grandmas that actually came to your house to cook the meals. So it's something that, I mean, it's important that architecture learns about its environment and its context to produce meaningful architectures. Because reading the situation is very important right now, and we cannot continue to propose the same old structure and designs that actually responded quite well to a situation that was from the 50s and the 60s, in the 70s probably. But starting from the 70s, changes were made, revolution were started, so we changed a lot our lifestyles, and living alone is a consequence of those changes.
So you did speak about culture a little bit here, because you said you're Italian, so you need a kitchen. And I mean, I relate to it. As Indians, we also need our kitchen.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people here can imagine living in a house without a kitchen. Now, I think this also gets into an area that I think we should talk about, and that is family as like a unit. and society as a large. And since this is something that as a trend has doubled since the 70s or the 80s, how do you think the idea of a family as a unit that stays together, because you said a lot of houses are also, family units. How do you think that notion of a family or occupants of this house has changed? And how do you think this trend reflects a changing society as a whole?
Well, I believe that living alone is a consequence of many changes in society. It depends on the country, depends on the historical period of those countries. But basically, living alone is possible right now with those numbers. I mean, because it was also possible before. For example, after the war, a lot of people lived alone because they didn't had an husband or a wife, simply because of the war. So a lot of people had those consequence of an historical period. But right now that we don't have any kind of those situation, living alone is derived basically from a gender revolution and a digital revolution in some way. One that is more social and the other one is more technological, but they had the same influence, basically the same importance in configuring different lifestyles, because starting from the 70s, the traditional familiar nucleus is not just the only one that can exist. I mean, women took power or starts to took power, and simply going out the house or going out the role of the obliged role of housewives, they started creating different possibilities inside the social roles. And after, together with the digital revolution that connects people and, as we said at the beginning, intertwined every aspects of our life, and also interconnects each other of us basically through Zoom or a social network or whatever. They create a different layer that's in some way juxtaposed to our material layer, and it made it, I don't know if more complex, but clearly different. Clearly different. We are always in touch with someone, so we don't need a direct contact or a physical contact with a person. And then we have in our mind this concept that we can live in a different model, thanks to the gender revolution, that we can live in a different models than the traditional family. And then, without entering in these other huge arguments, it started, a lot of other lifestyles that is not just living alone, but other kind of families, other group or living group, societal living group, or a lot of situations that were not simply in some way predicted by law during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. But funny is that architecture just follow the same old principles from the 50s and the 60s. In some way, the houses didn't change so much, at least in Europe.
Maria, you were saying something.
No, I wasn't. I was agreeing.
Yeah. And since you've made that film, and I think I want to bring it to popular culture now, you've kind of curated a wonderful set of vignettes, instances, clips about how this idea or this lifestyle of living alone has been even portrayed in the popular culture.
Yeah.
Where do you think we go from here now, if you were to push the boundaries and extrapolate the trend and speculate into what the future looks like in terms of living alone?
Well, it's funny because now I'm watching for the first time actually Sex and the City, And I was thinking a lot about this kind of topic because they kind of sell a romanticized view of these women living alone in New York, but they are actually, most of them are broke, you know, and it's like they can't afford clearly to live in the apartments where they live. So I don't know. Now maybe in the last TV series and the last movies that they are showing us, also in Netflix and stuff like that, maybe the trend is changing, and it's like cooler to live also with other people. Starts to be also showcasing this kind of new forms of living. For example, I don't know, New Girl.
Yeah.
They kind of share the flat. So I don't know. Sometimes we have the wrong examples, and sometimes it's like you know, I don't know. We can empathize more with this kind of references of pop culture. So yeah.
Well, I think something that should be important is to recognize that is happening. I mean, we don't live alone because we are a couple, me and Maria Vittoria, but it's something that is happening to a huge percentage of the population, at least in Western countries and Europe, and even in Japan, but we didn't study so much the Japanese situation. So it's something that it's hitting a huge part of the population. So it's something that we have to recognize that is happening. I mean, even though right now, of course, there are TV series or movies or whatever that is showing other lifestyles, but it was always happening that way. I mean, the other part of the population actually still lives in the most traditional kind of lifestyle. So it's normal that the 60s, the 60% or 70% of the population, and also the production, the cinematic production, respond to the other part of the population, but the 30 still is living alone. For example, if you want to talk about pop culture, Emily in Paris, that was like a huge mainstream TV series, at least a couple of years ago. She lived alone in Paris. I mean, probably the most expensive city in Europe. She had a wonderful job, of course, yeah, but she lived alone in Paris. And it is the dream, I believe, of everyone. Not sharing a very small flat in Paris, that is the actual situation in Paris. Yeah, in the city center, an attic in Paris, and you live alone in an attic in Paris, and you are happy. Yeah, of course, me too. I mean, who not?
Yeah.
So the first step, I mean, in the immediate future, I think could be the recognizing of living alone, not just by the people that I believe it's already recognizing living alone such as a possible lifestyle or a possible choice, but by the law, by the state, by the municipality, that living alone is something that it should happen in the city. I mean, a city should offer something that responds to this demand, and also help the people that wants to live alone in some way to regulate the situation, or to create a protected kind of normative for those who wants to live alone.
That's a fabulous way to wrap it up, Flavio and Maria. Thank you so much for your time and for actually even thinking about, studying something like this. Like, until we came across your article, I had no idea you could really look at a phenomenon of living alone and that it could be studied in such depth and that has so many dimensions to it. So thank you so much.
To you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Special thanks to Ayushi Thakur for the research and design support and Kahan Shah for the background score. You can follow us on Instagram at arcoffcenter and reach out to us through our website arcoffcenter.com. That is ARCHOFFCENTRE. And thanks for listening.